The Proof of Love is the story of a Cambridge mathematician, a young Cambridge mathematician, Spencer Little, who, for various reasons that you find out during the novel, goes to work on a Lake District sheep farm. And it's set in the summer of 1976, which was a big heat wave, I think the biggest heat wave that the UK's ever had. And it's about the relationship between Spencer, 10-year-old Alice, and this other relationship, and about how these relationships combined contribute really to Spencer's tragic downfall. I was brought up in the Lake District, and my parents bought our farm in 1976, so that was when we moved there, and it was a bankrupt farm, so the garden was full of nettles, and I remember just being plonked on a rug with my three sisters in the middle of these nettles, so we couldn't move anywhere, and the sun just blazing down on us, and eating this packet of cheesy biscuits, and them all sort of melting in our fingers. And I think the memory of that heat must have stayed with me somehow, and came out in this. I had quite a strange family setup. My mother's French pen friend married my mother's cousin. My parents had been together since they were 13, and they all got married when they were in their early 20s, and they decided to buy this farm together. So we lived in the farm, two families in the farmhouse, and they ran the farm, all four of them. So I suppose I had quite a strange family upbringing. Also, my father had, he was also brought up on a farm in the Lake District, but he went to Oxford to study maths, which was a very surprising thing for somebody to do from his class and his background. So my family was a little bit of a kind of outsider family, and a bit of a strange setup, although it didn't feel particularly strange to us at the time. So I guess I'm interested in looking at how different sorts of families work. The family in the book is much more of a traditional Lake District family, of the sort that I knew, actually. It reminds me a little bit of people that I went to school with in some ways. But I'm interested in what happens when somebody comes from the outside and how that can change the dynamic. I've been to a couple of reading groups and a couple in libraries, and I'm really impressed by how closely people read. I was very flattered when I've been there, and they've asked quite in-depth probing questions that show that they've really paid attention. And it's interesting to see who reads your books, actually, because a lot of the time it's not exactly the audience that I would have thought. And I think also living in the middle of London, you end up living in a small sort of bubble, and a lot of the media is aimed at that little bubble, or it's written by that little bubble. But actually most people in the UK don't live in London, and they might live in little villages, or they might live somewhere else. And the questions that they ask show me the different perspectives of the people who are actually reading my work. And I find that fascinating. So I've actually very much enjoyed, I found it terrifying because it's you and maybe 12 people there in a room. But actually it's very rewarding by the end of it. I always come out of there pleased that I've been there. Well, the whole way I got round to writing The Proof of Love, which is my second novel, was really down to my agent. She's very good at pushing me, not in a way that sort of gets my back up and makes me dig my heels in, but she sort of saw that, you know, the first book had come out, and that really I needed a little bit of a push to get things going again. So she said, look, we're going to have breakfast with the publisher, the editor of the publisher, just to celebrate the first book. But why don't you come up with 3 ideas to talk about with her? Just, you know, you might not really be going to do them, but come up with 3 ideas. So I did, and we had breakfast, and I said afterwards, you know, does that mean anything? And she said, no. And then the publisher rang up and said, we want to buy the book. So in a way, I think I was very lucky. I was a little bit cosseted by the agent making me do that, and then the editor, you know, being nice enough to pick it up and go with it. And I have to say, my publishers have been very supportive the whole way through. I felt quite guided, I suppose, in a very light sort of way, I know that I can always email my editor and just ask her questions that I have. It's a quite close sort of three-way relationship, me, my agent, my editor. And that's so far been what I needed and been enough to get me through to this point. I don't know how it's going to go with the third. We'll see.